Mr. Speaker, while Democrats continue to want to raise the taxes on the hardworking Americans, or when they keep proposing, as they did this year, over $1 trillion increase, close to $1 trillion, $890 billion to be precise, dollar increase on the already, I think, large deficit. Thank God the President, though, has released the President's management agenda that we're all familiar with, which outlines a plan to clean up this mess of just waste and fraud and abuse that exists, and it's rampant here in Washington, that has always been rampant here in Washington. Congressman Hensarling from Texas, recently, a little while ago, and I heard him eloquently mention some issues that should concern all Americans as to how Washington wastes Americans, taxpayers' money. And I'm reminded of all of the cases, case after case, of fraud, waste, and abuse that continues to happen, including money that is just absolutely just lost in this huge bureaucracy. In 1999, the Army, for example, took an inventory of its assets and found that, check this out, 56 airplanes, 32 tanks, I don't know how you lose 32 tanks, and 36 Javelin command launch units, for which it had no record. Had no records for them. That same year, GAO identified more than $3 billion in inventory that the Navy had, quote unquote, lost in transit. How do you lose $3 billion of inventory in transit? The GAO also found $400,000 in computer purchases that the Department of Education had not recorded in the property records. And by the way, 200,000 of those computers could never be located. And yet, I repeat, the Democrats insist on raising the taxes on the hard-working Americans because there's not enough money. There's not enough money if you want to lose more money, if you want to throw away more money, if you want to splurge more money. But there's clearly more than enough money to do what we need to do here, as long as we get a little bit more responsible. And I commend the President for his efforts. Mr. Speaker, the Inspector General at the Department of Veterans Affairs alone has identified more than 5,500 possible cases of individuals who may be defrauding the Veterans Association by receiving benefits intended for veterans. These are benefits that are intended for benefits, but for people that are dead. 5,500. 14,000, almost 14,000 incarcerated veterans have been paid about $100 million. These are not small sums. $100 million in benefits that they were clearly not eligible for. And yet, the Democrats insist on coming up with proposal after proposal and budget after budget that raises the taxes of the hard-working Americans in this country. To do more of this? Over $100 million, another $100 million. And improper payments have missed Medicare beneficiaries who rely on them. Over the last 4 years, by the way, for example, the Department of Agriculture has spent $5.13 billion in improper payments intended to go to food stamp beneficiaries. And yet the Democrats say there's not enough money, and they insist on trying to raise the taxes on the hard-working Americans of this country. Mr. Speaker, that's why with a number of my colleagues, we have come up with the Washington Waste Watchers to not only highlight the fact, not that Washington has enough money, that we have too much money, that there's not enough accountability. And we commend the President for his steps in the right direction, and we're going to continue to let the American people know where their money is being spent, in many cases misspent. And no, we're not going to support raising taxes. We're going to support changing the culture up here from a culture of waste, of fraud and abuse, to a culture of fiscal responsibility. I yield back the remaining part of my time.